We have a really good talk here, advice for non-technical managers hiring technical teammates. And we have with us Jessica and Clinton from Momentum Learning. Momentum is a partner of ours. They are a awesome American Underground tenant. And they are doing some really cool things for people who are trying to learn how to get more technical, learn how to code. And I'm sure they'll explain more about what they do. But I would like you guys to give a very, very warm round of applause for Clinton and Jessica.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see familiar faces. My name is Jessica Mitsch, and I'm one of the, along with Clinton, co-founders of Momentum, and I am our CEO.
I'm Clinton Dreisbach, and I'm our CTO and co-founder.
We're a relatively new company in the American Underground, although Clinton and I have both worked in the AU over many years in different capacities. So it's good to be part of this community. What we do at Momentum, like Philippe said, is we work in code education. We train people how to become software developers and web developers, and we also work with organizations on upskilling their teams. So we're located in the American Underground at ATC. How many of you have visited the basement? Great, come down and visit us. We have free community classes that we run really frequently, about every other week. So several times a month there are free community classes in our space. They're typically 6 to 8 in the evenings. The topics completely vary. We have several AU members that come and give guest talks for us, and then our staff also delivers them as well. So please come check those out. So what we're here to talk to you about today is working in the startup space and being in an environment where you're on a team with technical folks and non-technical folks. So Clinton and I are actually in that exact space. We're co-founders. I do not have a technical background. Clinton has a lifelong career in technology with a technical background. So we can definitely relate for those of you that are technical or not technical and work with somebody that has a different skill set. Raise your hand in here if you are a founder, just so we know. Keep your hands up if you're a founder that has a technical background. Okay. Raise your hand if you're a founder that does not have a technical background but works in tech. Okay, cool. So we want this talk to be really interactive. We are going to cover 4 different things in regards to working with and hiring folks that are technical, if you are a non-technical founder or a non-technical manager. So the first thing that we're going to talk through is just how to recruit, or actually, let me back that up. We're going to talk through establishing what you need. Then we're going to talk through how to recruit, how to interview, and then finally how to manage folks. Again, this is from the perspective, I'm going to kind of lead this and interview Clinton. So I'm going to be the person that's giving you the talk from my perspective, which is without a technical background. My background in tech is actually on the HR side of the house. So I've been in people operations and recruitment. That was where I came from, but always within tech, just not in a technical role. And Clinton, I'm going to let you actually talk briefly about what you've done over your career to just establish your background.
Sure. I like to keep it humble, but I've been in software development for, depending on whether you count when I first started writing code or when I did it professionally, about 18 to plus years. I've worked with more than one local agency. I've worked in several local startups. I've worked for 2 large government organizations at this point. And yeah, a lot of things in between. I managed to go out to Seattle for Boeing for a while. So I've had many years of developing software, both developing and managing developers. I worked as the development director at Bigot Labs, which is here in town. I also was the lead developer for our team when I worked at RTI International here at the Triangle.
So the way that we're going to format this is it's going to be very casual. We want to make sure we're addressing your questions. And we're going to kind of walk through it in chunks, and I'm going to, like Oprah style, interview Clinton. Because what I've found, being somebody that does not have a specific technical background, to be the most helpful is to make sure that you have somebody on your team that brings skill sets to the table that you don't have. And to make sure that works, you have to ask them lots of questions and really get to know their world. So we're going to first walk through establishing what you need. How many of you have kind of had a startup idea or currently are working in a startup and haven't quite been able to figure out the scope of work when it comes to building something technical? Cool. Okay. Yeah, I definitely think that's something that is a challenge when I talk to other folks like myself that have an idea, but they need somebody else to help them build it. So I've got some questions for Clinton on how this should run, and then we'll open questions for you all. How should non-technical founders approach figuring out what they need in a technical hire?
So that's a really good question. How to best approach to figure out what you need? If you have a technical mentor or someone you can lean on, of course, they can help you to find that. But one of the better things that you can do is if you don't know that, you can actually bring that in as part of your interview process, right? You have an idea of what you want to build. You have an idea what the features would be, the market you're trying to reach, what it should do. And so that quickly becomes a really good question to ask potential people that you're talking to say, my goal is this, like what would be the technical components of that? What's the hard technical problem here? What's easier than I expect? So to figure that out, of course, you can just ask a technical person. But in addition, being able to have a mentor or someone you can even just bring in for a few hours, you can find a contractor to do that, that's going to help you a lot to get you a list of at least the parts that you need, if not choose the exact technologies.
So what are the most important traits or some traits that you could pull out for somebody who's non-technical to look for when they are outlining a job description for somebody that's technical on their team?
So if you are not technical and you're writing this job description, the technical components are going to matter, right? But I don't think they're the most important. Having someone who is excited about training other people is important. Someone who just wants to write code and doesn't want to teach you how it works, not what you want, right? You want someone who has worked as a mentor before or has worked in some sort of training capacity, because you're going to want to get that technical knowledge from them. You don't have to know everything about how it works. That's not your strength, but you do want to have a general idea that you can bring in. And so that's going to be the most important thing. And it's someone who is just passionate about communication, right? Because a huge amount of the job, especially when you're on a small development team, when you haven't split up your jobs quite so much, a huge part of the job is getting that non-technical description and then translating that into what the components are going to be. To be able to take that apart and to hear well, right? To listen to what your actual goal is and then translate that into technical specs. It's real easy to have someone who's going to hear what you say and go, yeah, I know basically what I should do, and then come up with their own idea technically. So having someone who's really good at that level of communication, both where they can teach you what they're doing, but then they can understand what you want in a really clear way.
And last question on this topic of trying to discover what it is that you need before you even go out and start recruiting somebody is oftentimes you might just need to build an MVP before you're ready to bring somebody on full time. So how do we know, what we might be able to hire an agency to develop for us, and when we need to go from that environment to actually bringing somebody on our team full time?
That's a really good question, and it brings up the point that the person or people who build your MVP may not be the people that you need to grow it later. I've seen that in startup after startup where you have the initial development team who's there for a year or two, they build MVP, it's messy, it's wild, but it works. You start bringing in new developers, and that original team, they sort of exit the building one by one as you grow to about 10 or 15 people. I've seen it happen a bunch of times. But as to what can you get an agency to build? Right, they're really good at getting that MVP, and they have that skill I just mentioned about taking what you are asking for, taking what you think you need and translating it into not just a technical product, but specifically, like, what's the bare bones of this that's going to get you 80% of the way there. They do that every day. That's a huge part of their job, and they have people who are going to be excellent at that. You may butt heads with them. It's going to happen because they're going to want to pare it down, but they know what they're talking about. So you can bring in someone to build, the version of it that you can get out there in front of people, for friends and family, maybe even for your full market. I've done that. Working at agencies here in town, I did that more than once, but there's one in particular that I think about. I don't necessarily have to mention their name, but one that I worked with that we built like the very first version that they put to market, and then we worked with them to train their development team on how to take it over and how to build in new features. Always with an eye towards expansibility. So that was a little bit of a rambling answer, but I think it's perfectly fine to get an agency to build the initial version of your product if they also are people who are invested in training you to be able to do that, to be able to take it over. In that particular instance, of course, you know the story, I ended up training their president who had taken some computer science classes in college 10 years ago. It was a really fun experience it was an interesting experience. It was great. I loved it. It was also hard. There were tears, but being able to have somebody who is willing to step up and do that, I think you can get your MVP out really quickly and do a really good job with it.
Great. Does anybody have any questions on establishing what you need? Are any of you in that pattern right now, trying to figure out what do I need as I look to hire folks on my team that are technical? I'm going to just bring this to you.
Hello, my name's Brianda. So when you're recruiting, I'm sure, I know I've gotten several applications. Are there any key indicators? I know you said communication's one that that you might need to move on to the next person, but are there any other indicators that you're wasting your time with someone, a potential recruit?
Yeah, I'm going to let you answer that from a technical standpoint, and I can fill it.
Yeah, so I can definitely answer that. If you don't have the technical background, it's hard to do a technical interview, but there's some tricks, and I don't know if you're going to get this topic later, but we'll go ahead and get on it. There's some tricks that you can use to have that technical interview even though you are not necessarily technical yourself. One question I ask in every technical interview, even though I'm technical, I think it's the right question for anyone to ask, is to ask about things that they are particularly excited about or not excited about. And if you know the technology stack you're going to use, if somehow you've determined that, you can ask them specifically about that. So let's say you're going to have something that's built on top of Django and Python. You can say, what's your favorite thing about Django? If they don't have one, well, they don't know it very well. And if all they have are it's okay, then they're not excited about it. So cool, you've got that piece of information. You should also ask them what's their least favorite thing about it, because if they don't have one, they're either lying or they don't know it very well. And though if they're like, oh, this one part is terrible, I hate it, well, they're probably going to be the same sort of person who may be later on when you're like, hey, I need this new feature. You're like, this feature is terrible and I hate it. And you don't want that person, right? You want someone who's jazzed, but has strong opinions, has ideas, knows something well enough to know what they like and dislike about it. So that's my number one trick for, doesn't matter how technical you are, you don't even have to necessarily understand their answer fully. You're going to know. I mean, we all have a sense. If someone's BSing us, we know. They're like, oh yeah, my favorite thing is the 4-bots, and we win you up the phase manager, and you're like, okay, get out of here, who are you? But you'll have an idea there, and seeing that passion in their eyes and seeing that their depth of knowledge, I think really helps. Anyone who acts like you, treats you as a lesser because you're not technical, I mean, I think this is an obvious one, but that person's wasting your time. You're not going to enjoy working with them. And no one should. Right? Technical skills are just skills. You have different skills. You're different people, but you're at the same level. So having someone who is excited to tell you about it, who's not like, oh, well, you may not get this, but I really don't like the way foreign keys work in this database. And you'd be like, what do you mean I don't get it? Explain it to me. And if they can't, then you're wasting your time. So that would be my major tricks I would recommend.
Yeah, and to praise Clinton on that, he does this really, really well. I've always taken to him and been like, hey, I don't know what this is, or can you explain this to me? And having somebody, I really value having a co-founder that looks at me and doesn't think that I'm dumb for not knowing and is able to explain things in layman's terms. So I think that works really well. And to also add on to that, you know, being very clear before you start talking to people about the stage of your company and then and where you want to take it is going to be important, because different people are going to plug in at different stages. So if you're early stage, actually getting really explicit about what's great about that and then what is also going to be the challenge of that, and being very honest with anybody that you interview. Okay, these are the exciting things we're working on. This is why I think it's exciting. This is the opportunity that exists, and this is all the things that are going to make this hard. And if somebody's still excited and they can fit into those things that will make something hard, that's going to be really, you know, a good hire for you. We did this. My background is I was at Red Hat when it was about 4,000 employees, and was on the HR team, and we took it from 4,000 employees to when I left, which was about 4 years later, we were almost over 10,000 employees. So even on a company that has to scale that big, every year the HR team was getting together and putting a list of, okay, this is what, these are the things that make this growth really exciting, and these are the things that make this growth really challenging environment to work in. And we have to be honest with people, so when they come on board, they're actually set up for success, and they know coming into it, they've got the proper expectation set. You know, everything in life comes down to expectation setting, and making sure you meet those expectations. So being clear with that would be important. Did somebody else have a question on that topic before we move on? Oh, there's another hand. Okay. So, getting into more, that was a good segue, and getting more into recruiting folks in your team. How many of you have found it challenging to find somebody technical to work on your team? Right? Yeah. There's a reason that Clinton and I started Momentum. It's because there are not enough software developers, web developers out there to meet the needs of the market. So it's a highly competitive field, and we want to give you some really inside tricks in finding the right talent and going to the right places. So for starters, I'm going to ask about LinkedIn. Who here's on LinkedIn? Who here's not on LinkedIn? This guy. Clinton is not the first person I've worked with, or the first person that I've hired that has not actually been on LinkedIn and is highly talented. And there's a reason for that. It's because you get harassed on LinkedIn.
Yes, I do.
Senior developers, really talented folks, typically have an inbox full on LinkedIn and kind of stay away from it. And again, the last startup I was with, the CTO also did not have a LinkedIn profile, very intentionally. So let's talk about where you can go to actually find the people that you're looking for, that you're going to get their attention, and it is a more authentic space for them. So where would you recommend, are there 3 websites that you would go to actually post a job?
Great. So the 3 that I would choose, I have 2, and then 1 if you're willing to hire remotely. So the first one that my phone almost fell there, that I would choose is Stack Overflow. I've been really happy with their job platform, and I've gotten jobs through there. You know, like when I get recruiter emails, I ignore them. The recruiter emails I get through Stack Overflow, by and large, are better than any other ones I get. And I don't know if that's just a better class for using it or what, but I read them. I'm interested in them. If I hadn't co-founded a company, I would consider them dangerous things to end up in my email inbox, because they're usually cool. One of my favorite ones was with a company that recycles like heavy metals and other dangerous stuff out in like Western North Carolina. It's the coolest thing, right? And I saw that and I went, wow, they need someone just like me. That would be interesting. But I own a company, and so I was going to be right here, which I'm glad to be. The second one I would choose is GitHub, just because you're going to have a lot of developers checking it. You know, in my experience, your success rate at sort of pushing out there to get developers, as opposed to having them come to you, it's a lot easier to get them to come to you. So going where they are is good. GitHub jobs are great. And then we work remotely is awesome if you're willing to hire remote people. It's a really good site. And the sort of people that you want are going to be checking those places. Just on the LinkedIn thing, I mean, you should certainly check there. And I would also recommend to anyone who is below sort of senior level as a developer to have a LinkedIn. You should. It sucks, it's horrible, you're going to get weird emails all the time, but it's important. You're going to get good references, you're going to get people who are interested in you that might have an interesting job, and if nothing else, it's an easy way to put together your resume. I deleted mine for one simple reason. I took a job, I mean, I was getting harassed, but whatever. And then I took a job at the Center for Data Science at RTI, and literally the moment data science showed up on my LinkedIn, it was just a swamp of like, emails came in a deluge. And so, anyone who gets to the point where that's happening, like, we all hate our inbox. Anything you do to not hate it, you're going to do. So, yeah, I do find that a lot of senior developers, scrub LinkedIn and get off there.
So cut through the noise is important. I am on LinkedIn all the time. This is why we're a good pair. I can go out and find the things we need on LinkedIn, and Clinton stays off of it, and it's great. So the thing you mentioned on that piece that I also want to call out is also making sure people come to you and that you go to them, and all of that happens in person, right? So here locally, if you're looking for somebody to hire, where would you recommend that they go to meet people in person?
Okay, so there's a lot of answers to that. There's meetups I could talk about. There's a lot of great meetups here, depending on your technology and what you're doing. But if you're web-based at all, looking at stuff like Modern Web, Refresh the Triangle, those are really good places to go. I like both of those as well because they cater to a diverse audience of people, not just diverse in terms of gender, class, and race, but diverse in terms of what people do. It's not a purely technical meetup. Both of those have people who come in who are project managers, who are designers, who own companies, and so they're a really good place to go meet people. My other answer, which is slightly more tongue-in-cheek, but not really, is who here is familiar with, my brain did that thing that happens when you're in front of a crowd, down in the free co-working space down in RTP, the Frontier. Who's been to the Frontier for any reason? Go there at Friday at lunchtime. They have food trucks. Everyone comes outside, everyone mills around. Your competitors are doing it. I've seen large companies do it. Fidelity will go and give out USB sticks to people because they're always looking for new developers. Go there at lunchtime, have a dessert, have a hamburger, have a great time, and sit down at a table with people and just talk about what you're doing. You're going to find people there for sure. I've seen heavy recruiting happen there, and I think it's an untapped, or not as nearly as well tapped as it could be, resource.
And one place that I found success too, and partly is what we do in tech education, but go to find people that are speaking at conferences or speaking at local tech groups. That generally means that they're really excited about what they do. It also means that they're the kind of person that can talk to you in layman's terms. They've developed that skill. So I would definitely recommend, if you're looking for somebody, check out some of the tech education meetups. And if you're especially looking to hire diverse talent for your team, Girl Develop It, Women in Tech, Women Who Code, all of those organizations, Black Girls Code, all of those, the instructors for those courses are going to be really great folks to talk to. And because they teach those classes, they're out in the community. They might have a job and might not want to leave what they're doing full time, but they would probably know more people and have more of a connection. So I would definitely check out those organizations.
Yeah, hey, thank you for mentioning that. I can't believe I forgot that. Those are obvious places. There is one other place I forgot to mention that I think is a really good resource if you're looking for fresh talent that's really hungry to learn and are ready to really join your organization, be a loyal part of it. And that is there's this really cool place in the underground called Momentum Learning. You should come check out. There's a lot of people there who are just they're very junior developers, but they are eager and ready. And I've just been really surprised at the caliber of people I found there. So
I wonder who teaches them. Okay, cool. Any questions around recruiting? Any challenges that do you have a current challenge that we could try to answer a question about? Yeah.
Getting someone to help you complete an MVP on minimal or non-existent budget.
Can you say that a little louder?
We're trying to acquire technical talent which have a very low or non-existent budget.
Budget issues. Okay. So finding somebody that can build, are you looking to build an MVP? Okay, on a low budget. You actually,
I can speak to this.
Yes. So Clinton, who in here has heard of Green to Go or Don't Waste Durham? So that's actually Clinton's wife behind that, is behind that organization, and they actually went through this summer, and you've been helping them work on these things. So this is relevant.
So yeah, as Jessica mentioned, my wife is the CEO of Raleigh and Durham, which has a product called Green to Go. You may have seen it around town in restaurants. It's a reusable container for your to-go food, whether you're getting it to go or leftovers or whatever. Subscription program, super cool. As you can imagine, as a nonprofit that has no major investors, they're operating on the most shoestring of budgets. If you've used Green to Go and you've seen one of those containers around town that you drop off your container in, those were all made by hand for free by volunteers. Like they do a lot of work. So the first MVP of their product, and it was the slightest MVP, sort of in your situation where it's just like the barest minimum they could possibly get out there, I built. One recommendation that I would give you is to not choose your spouse if you're low on a budget and you need a developer. No one's going to like that, especially if you have kids. Everyone's just going to be sad at the end of the day, so don't do that one. But that's what we did, and we got to a point where we looked at each other and we went, hey, I think we'd like to stay married. Let's get a new developer. And so we did.
That's exactly where I am, so that's
Awesome. I'm so glad. Crystal isn't here today. She said she might drop by, but anyway. So I was going to see if I had to watch what I say. That's a joke. I don't have to. Anyway, so yeah, what they did that was really smart is they did get a little bit of budget through a couple of people who gave them donations, and not a lot. It was I think around $2,000 that they ended up with, and they knew the technology and they knew people were interested in using it. It's built on Django. I like Django a lot. And what they did was they advertised something unique. They said, hey, we're not looking to hire a full-time person. We don't have the budget to do that. But if you are in between jobs or you've just come out of training, but if you're excited about Django and you want to make $2,000, then we want to have you for 4 weeks. Not for a certain set of features, although that would have been awesome, but they realized like a time period was better. $2,000 for 4 weeks of work is not great for a developer, but you advertise what's cool about you. I'm not certain what you're working on, but in this case, right, it was something that someone who is civic-minded, who cares about the environment, get really excited about. Getting a volunteer to do it for free, not a good idea, because it's just going to be their scraps of time they have left over. By having someone who, again, was getting a pittance, but they're getting something out of it, and so they are committed to it. We had a developer come in. He was awesome. She found him through, I believe that he had been at Duke previously is how she found him, but he was a really experienced developer, like shockingly experienced for the amount of money. And he actually went on immediately afterwards to work at ThoughtBot, which is a great agency. Like he was very high caliber, but the entire way she went about that is advertising not through normal circles. She didn't put it on GitHub or anything like that. She advertised through her friends and through Facebook in circles that were about what she was doing. That is environmental circles, civic circles, volunteer circles. In doing that, she actually got 3 people who she was able to interview, which was more than we expected, and one of them was really, really good. She has another person now that is doing the same thing, who's a former Iron student that I taught, but someone who went out and got a couple years of experience from Django first. So yeah, I would say get someone to come in with a limited time span or a limited amount of money, but they're going to do their best for you if they're excited about your product and have that deadline that they know they have to meet.
Yeah, and I would also to plug Momentum as well. We have we hire associate instructors for our classes, and we'll hopefully be bringing somebody on in July. A lot of times they're also developing their portfolio and finding somebody that wants, again, their motive there is to help develop their own portfolio and help you out. So in a lot of those circumstances, finding a hungry graduate of a program that they just learned to code is a great idea for that as well.
I forgot one small detail, and this may not be something you can do. This is not applicable to everyone. But one of the things we did that really sold people was that the code for the project was open source. Being able to have something you can show other people is huge, right? Be able to go in a job interview. As a developer, I can't tell you how many times I've been like, well, I did this cool thing that I cannot show you a bit of, right? That's not something that's great. So if that's feasible, and it may be, right? It may be that what you bring to it is not that you have a certain code base, but that you have a certain domain knowledge or whatever. If you can make that open source, I think you're going to attract people who are really excited about building code.
I think there was one other question in the back that we could get to, and I want to address, as someone that loves open source, came from Red Hat, want to address this because I hear this question a lot. So again, for somebody that's not technically oriented or might not be as familiar with open source, if you are concerned about the intellectual property of the product that you're building, especially in the MVP stage, why should you not be concerned? Or why is open source still a good idea, I should say?
It's a great question, and I mean, the answer is it's not always a good idea. It really depends on what you're doing. Like, do you have some sort of algorithm you're building to do something that no one else is doing out there, right? That the intellectual property is really in your code. Well, then open source is probably not what you want to do. Although, even then, it could be. If what you're bringing to the table is you and your domain knowledge and your team, then who cares if people can see your code? They cannot replicate you. They can't get you. They can't get your team. Hopefully, hopefully, and you can go ahead and do that. Now, if you do worry about intellectual property, about someone taking it and commercializing it, open source is a big world, and like when you say open source, people even get different ideas. I could ask everyone here what open source is, and I bet I would get more answers than people in the room. But one thing, and I don't want to dive deep into like open source licensing, but there are different licenses that have different restrictions around them. Like there's ones I prefer because they're more open, but one that's widely used is the new public license, the GPL. That ensures that anyone who takes your code and changes it and uses it, wants to redistribute it anyway, they have to make that public. They have to do the same thing. So you can take it out. GPL.
L is in line.
Yes, L is in lion. And then there's variants of that can even make it where if they put it on the web at all, they have to share it. Again, those licenses are, they force other people to share alike, basically, which can be good for you. I worked on a project, thinking back to my days at RTI, I worked on a project that we were commercializing. It was an ability for police departments to look at their 911 data in new and interesting ways that they didn't have the ability to look at before. The Durham Police Department uses it. It's pretty cool. But I convinced them to open source it with the GPL. They wanted to be able to sell it, but I said, you're going to have people that are not nonprofits who feel like they can make some money with this. If they want to grab that and take it, awesome. You can take their features they implement and you can bring them back in. So it was a good, and again, that was a situation where we had something they didn't. We were a well-respected research agency that knew, you knew if we were talking to you, we weren't trying to sell you something. We just want you to have better insight in your data, and we want to look at the data too and do some research on it. So yeah, anyway, a combination of looking to see really where your value is, and if it's not in the code, feel free to open source. If it is partially the code and you're worried about that, then talk to an expert on software licensing. Don't talk to me, talk to an actual expert. I'm not a lawyer, and they can help you figure out what the best way for you to both do that and make it available where other people can see it, but not steal your intellectual property is.
Is there another question in the back on, did you have a question on recruiting? Okay. Any other questions on recruiting? Yeah.
I had just additional facets to that. Same question about, what about equity and college students?
Equity and college students. So
Yeah.
what is the question about college students?
So we're thinking about bringing on somebody who's junior to mid-level. We're looking at somebody who's, like you said, young, excited about what we're doing. And it would be more full-time rather than part-time. And the conversation would be weighted towards equity over salary. So how does that look, and what should we be looking for, and is that even possible to do?
That's a great question. Yeah. So again, I've worked with placing people into jobs, and I've seen folks come out of programs and take equity-only offers. It really is up to the individual and how much time they need to put into the work. What I would recommend to you to do, and you might have already done this, but of course, make sure you do some market research on what the salaries are going for in the area, and make sure that's matched to the skill sets. I've seen this happen so many times where folks are looking to hire somebody and they forget to ask them, what do you need from a salary and compensation standpoint? They might miss something completely simple in that process, and they could have missed hiring somebody who would have taken an offer that is close to, an equity-only offer, but they missed that, what's important to them is that they're home at noon on Fridays to let their dog out for whatever reason. Make sure you're just really upfront and you're asking smart questions and open-ended questions and just listening to folks. Again, as far as the equity-only thing, I would make sure you put a time frame around that. I've seen people take that, but they've taken it and, hey, this is an equity-only opportunity, but I've got 3 months, and then at the end of 3 months, we're going to talk about what salary I can bring in, or we're going to talk about if benefits are a possibility and those kind of things. I would make sure you have a really good attorney working with you on that. I know that there's resources through the American Underground. You need to paper that, especially early stage, just be very, very clear. So I've seen it happen. Any other questions? Okay, so we're gonna go into, and how much time do we have? Is this gonna go until 1?
You can go for about 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes, okay. So we're gonna talk about interviewing, because this is another thing that I know is a challenge. It kind of came up a little bit earlier as far as making sure you're addressing, the person as a whole, and are they going to be a fit for your team, and setting expectations. But as somebody that is highly technical, you've definitely been interviewed by people that are not, that are in senior level roles. What should they not do?
Ooh. So what should a non-technical person not do?
Yeah.
Okay, I can tell you what a technical person should not do, but let me see. What should a non-technical person not do? I can tell you the biggest one, and this is a little bit of a story, but it's a real story. This is true. So I was interviewing. I was considering a couple of different roles, and one of them was CTO of a startup that needed a CTO. They did not have one. They needed one badly. They had a small development team that really needed some leadership on it. And I talked to the CEO. I think we had 3 separate conversations over long coffees. 2-hour conversations. We were a match. It made sense. I liked what they were doing. It was awesome. At the end of that 3rd conversation, he said, I think this is a match. I think we should do this. I'm like, yeah, me too. And he's like, well, there's just one thing. I'd like for you to talk to one of my investors. He's very technical. I just want to make sure you haven't been bullshitting me. I did not take that job. I didn't tell that guy what I actually thought, which was, that he could go jump. But I was like, thanks. I'm going to think about it. And then we didn't talk that much after that. If someone, and this is a particular case, right? This is someone in a CTO level position. But if you're trying to hire a technical co-founder, and you haven't been able to tell whether or not they actually know what they're talking about in 3 long conversations, then something's wrong, right? Either they aren't technical and they have been BSing you, in which case you probably know that, or you haven't been listening. But there is nothing really ruder you can do than say, I don't believe you. The thing you just said to me isn't true. Don't do that, right? That's a terrible move. There are ways to ask the same question, right? That person could have said, hey, we work with a particular set of technologies. I know someone who's an expert in them. I'd love for you two to have a conversation just to get to, so you can get to know more about how we're doing things, and they can see how you're a good fit. I would have jumped at that. But don't accuse someone of lying. Don't accuse someone of BSing you. It's a ridiculous concept. Don't ask them to do stuff that you aren't prepared to handle. Like, don't try and put them on a whiteboard if you're not a technical person. That's a bad move. I can talk about things that you should do, but I think that's a follow-up question Jessica's going to ask.
Yeah, and on that comment, I've definitely hired a lot of folks for technical roles and in previous companies, and don't have that experience, but had the ultimate decision making in the hiring process. And I did make it part of the process that they talked to somebody who on the team was technical, or if we didn't have somebody on the team at that point, somebody outside of it. But again, it's about setting that expectation up front. Hey, part of this is I do not have a background in this. This is my role in our company, and I want to make sure we get this right. So I'm going to introduce you to somebody who's going to go through that process with you. But the other thing that I've learned about folks that are really excited about technology is a Google search gives you a lot of information on them. And that GitHub is, you can look at their GitHub profile, and if you don't know specifically what to look at, you can at least see there's an activity bar on GitHub that's going to show you how often they're committing. And if that is a really active space, I know that they're active. So there's ways that you can go ahead and sense that out before you even get into that formal interview process. I think everybody tends to think, oh, of course I'm going to Google somebody, of course I'm going to look at their online stuff. But sometimes you forget when you're moving really fast, and I think that's really important. Also, a lot of developers have blogs out there, so you can read a little bit about them, kind of look at what projects they've done, and then you have better questions going into that. So I would definitely recommend it.
I'd like to speak to that in particular. I make a big differentiation when I'm thinking about hiring someone between positive indicators and negative indicators. So thinking about things like, do they have a blog? Do they have an active GitHub profile? Those are positive indicators. Those are things that are great if they have them. I do not count the lack of them as negative indicators. And I think it's an important thing to remember. People are in different stages of life where you can have someone who's an amazing developer, who knows exactly what she's doing. She's also a mom of 2 kids. You think she's going to go home and write open source? Probably not. She's probably going to go home and yell at a 3-year-old who's just been paint all over the house, like I have done many times in my life. Or someone who, there's always stuff going on in people's lives, right? So if they have that, that's cool. That's awesome. They have some spare time to do that. If they don't let that be a stumbling block where you go, okay, this person isn't technical enough, they don't have an active GitHub profile. Bring that up though. I mean, right, you interview them and say, hey, I noticed you don't have a lot of open source. You can tell me about some projects you have worked on. Maybe they spend a lot of time working on projects that just are closed source. They put all their effort into the company they're currently working for, and none of that's open. So again, differentiate between activity you find online, very positive, very cool. Definitely worth checking out that person farther. But if they don't have that activity, then cool, now you have some questions to ask them instead of saying, I'm not going to hire this person because they don't have a lot of open source. I think you'll end up with a team full of young men if you do use that as a negative indicator.
Any other questions around the interview process? Because we are at, it's time. Anything that you've experienced, or if you have an interview coming up, is there anything that you want to ask about that?
I don't have an interview coming up, but just do you suggest any type of technical terms, or just like a few things we should at least be well versed in and knowledgeable about, even though we're not technical?
That's a great question. So the question is, what technical terms should you be versed in? What should you look up and have a little knowledge on before you start interviewing somebody? That's great. I'm going to let you answer that.
So it depends a lot on your product, but most people these days are building something around the web. So the basic building blocks of the web, like what is HTML, what is CSS, what is JavaScript, not even how to use them, but like what are they? What are those 3 things? That's good to know. What does the term front end mean versus the term back end? What does the term API mean? So there's a list of about 10 to 20 different words that you should just know, because they're going to get thrown around. Even the best communicator who is a technical person is going to throw those around sooner or later. So knowing those is good. If you don't know what your stack is yet, it's hard to say like, oh yeah, know this, that, or the other about it. But you often know at least sort of what general field you're in. There was a question that we're running short on time, and I'm going to sort of address through this is like, should the person that you hire know the specific stack that you're using? My answer to that is a little bit dependent on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a senior person, no. If you're looking for a junior person, probably. But specifically, make sure that they have expertise in the same arena, right? You're doing payment processing. Check to see if they have a payment processing project. Maybe it was in Ruby and yours is in Python. No big deal. Are you doing something with embedded development? Your RFID chips or Internet of Things. Make sure they have some experience in that area. Maybe they didn't use the same products. That's okay. People can learn. You have to as a developer. But yeah, so know both the basics of the web, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, what they are, how they work, front end, back end, what they are, how they work, and then know your arena. Know the buzzwords that are in the arena that you are currently in, so you can talk about that. But besides that, I don't think you have to have a specific thing. I mean, if you want to blow their mind and impress them, you can say, hey, tell me about your favorite text editor. Use Emacs. And they'll be like, whoa, this person knows a bunch. But you know, otherwise, I think you're okay knowing just the basics.
And on that point, we're here in the American Underground, so if you ever have any questions, just find us on Pegboard. You can find me on LinkedIn. Can't find Clinton on LinkedIn.
Sorry. I have a very active Twitter, but it's mainly about superheroes. So
again, thank you for having us. I hope this was helpful for you all. Jessica, Clinton, and we're with Momentum. We are in the basement. Please come visit us if you never get down to the basement of the tobacco campus. It's really cool, I promise.
it's very dumb.
Yeah. So come check us out and look us up on meetup.com for our community events. If you are looking to hire somebody, it's always helpful to take a free crash course just to get a little bit of that extra knowledge. Again, we offer 2-hour free crash courses about every other week right now. So please check those out. They're all listed on meetup.com. We also do put them in the AU list or in the AU newsletter. And we have our next immersive class is coming up on July 30th. So if you're interested in that, Sam, who's up front on our team, is the person to talk to. And we have a couple part-time classes that are taught in the evenings. They're 14-hour classes that will cover HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript as well.
Strangely, that's a perfect thing to do if you're interested in knowing those buzzwords.
Exactly. So just come check us out, check out our website, and we'll be around. You'll see us at Helpfest and other events. We love this community, so thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.